Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could join us as we thank God for another opportunity to learn about ourselves and the world around us. Today we'll be talking about earthly joys and sorrows from the Spirit's Book, Part 4, Hopes and Consolations, Chapter 1. The section of Chapter 1 we'll be talking about today is loss of those we love. We see the loss of those we love as something permanent. We can't bring them back, and independent of our own action. Is it permissible to mourn the loss of a loved one? Not only is it allowed, it is necessary for our spiritual growth. This cause of sorrow, which acts alike upon rich and poor, is the common law of humanity, for it is either a trial or an expiation. So mourning is a common law. Not only do we need to mourn for our spiritual growth, it is sort of a requirement in order for us to grow spiritually as well. Now, this is either a trial or an expiation. Mourning the loss of a loved one is a trial? But how can that be? Well, according to psychologist J.W. Warden, there are 4 tasks of mourning. Let's look at these 4 tasks. Number 1, to accept the reality of the loss. Well, that in itself is a trial. It's very difficult to just come to the realization that you've lost a loved one, and it's not easy to come to terms with that. But it is something that we need to work towards, and it is a difficult trial. Number 2, to work through the pain and grief. We're all going to experience this pain. Some of us have already experienced it. Many of us have made it through. We're still here today. However great the pain is, know that you're not alone. We're always surrounded by God's helpers, His angels, the good spirits, your guardian angel. You also have a material family around you. You have friends that you can rely on. Go to them. You have close family? Go to them as well. Know that you cannot do this alone. Number 3, to adjust to life without the deceased. We have to face reality, and that in itself is a trial. We have to move on. There has to be a way that we can make adjustments, and we must. As a matter of fact, we owe it to our loved ones who have passed on. We have to do our very best to move on because that's what they would want for us as well. And so adjustments are necessary to maintain a connection to the deceased while moving on with life. Now, this is very important. How do we maintain such a connection? We don't know how. Many of us don't. Is it important to maintain a connection? Some would say, no, leave them alone. May they rest in peace. That sounds like, forget about them, they'll be okay on their own. It shouldn't be that way. We should always think of our loved ones and maintain that connection. Mourning the loss of a loved one is an expiation. When grief involves guilt, yearning, anger, and regret, it then becomes an expiation. The pain stems from a wrongdoing that requires atonement. So why didn't I listen more when she was alive? Guilt sets in. I should have spent more time with him. We now have a yearning. But he was just a child. Anger, frustration, questioning. We start asking, where's the justice of God? I didn't get to tell her I was sorry and that I loved her. Now we have regrets. All of these are an expiation because they're things we have to work out on our own. There are things we cause to ourselves. If you didn't listen to someone, it's because you didn't listen. You should have paid attention. This is our fault. But what about when you're angry about a child being taken away too early? Well, it's our fault for being angry at God. Because who are we to judge what God determines to be fair and just? When death cuts down someone in your family, carrying off the youngest before the oldest without discrimination, you are accustomed to say that God is not just. He sacrificed someone who was still strong and had a full life ahead of them. He took someone who was useful, leaving behind those who cannot work. He broke a mother's heart by depriving her of the innocent child who was her only joy. This is coming from the Gospel According to Spiritism, also written by Allan Kardec. We must rise above our common thoughts about life in order to understand that there's goodness in places where we think there's evil. God's wisdom is everywhere, even when we blindly perceive a future of doom. We may even blindly perceive a future of despair. So where is God's justice in all of this? Well, we need to have faith, first of all, in understanding that God is all-knowing. And if God is all-knowing, and He created the universe, then He lives outside of time. Now, imagine that for a moment. Here is a being, an entity, a life force, who exists outside of our knowledge of time. He exists outside of it because He created time. So He knows what our past is. He knows what our present is. And He knows what we need for our future. Because God is all-knowing, all-loving. So do we put our trust in Him and say, well, He knows what I need for the future? He knows what that little boy needed when he was taken at the age of 4? Yes, God knows. The person who dies in the flower of youth is not a victim of fate. God judges that it is not suitable for that person to remain longer on earth. Those of you who understand the meaning of spiritual life, listen to the beatings of your heart when calling to these loved ones. If you ask God to bless them, you will feel great consolation, the kind which will dry your tears. You will feel magnificent aspirations, which will show you the future that our Supreme Lord has promised. This is a communication by the Spirit Samson, an ex-member of the Spiritist Society of Paris, 1863. This was published in the Gospel According to Spiritism, written by Allan Kardec. Back to the Spirit's book now. And it says, but you have the consolation of holding communication with your friends and loved ones through the means already possessed by you, while awaiting other means that will be more direct and more accessible to your senses. Okay, so here they're saying we already have the means of communicating with our loved ones. We do? How then can we communicate with our loved ones? Well, we can communicate with them through prayer, because prayer is the world's greatest wireless connection. We can communicate through meditation, because some questions can't be answered by Google. Intuition, because it is the whisper of the soul. And of course, through dreams. Sweet dreams. As you drift off to sleep, may you feel the love of your angels. May your burdens be lifted. May you dance across the heavens. And may you awaken feeling refreshed, inspired, and connected with the beauty of your soul. It's a very beautiful passage. Now, there's more meaning behind this passage if we use some words that we've learned in the study of Spiritism. For example, what about the word angels? Well, angels are people just like you and I. However, these angels have reached a higher level of existence. They have higher intelligence, higher emotional intelligence. They have more experience because they have existed on this earth many, many more times than we have through reincarnation. So as you drift off to sleep, may you feel the love of your spiritual family, which is the same as angels. We have a spiritual family, and each one of us has a spiritual guide, which is our guardian angel. May your burdens be lifted. Burdens are nothing more than trials and tribulations according to Spiritism. Now, may your trials and tribulations be lifted. Well, that is a temporary request because we all know when we die, our spirit leaves our body. So we're asking for some rest there, a little bit of a timeout before we come back to this trial, to this world of trial and expiations. So yeah, may you have a little bit of freedom there and rest. But those trials and tribulations, they'll be there when you get back. May you dance across the heavens. Heavens is the spiritual realm, the spirit world, however you might want to look at it. But it is all around us, all the time. So when our spirit leaves our body, they're saying, may you dance across the heavens. May your spirit move about and learn and enjoy meeting with family on the other side. We do every night. We just don't remember when we wake up. And may you awaken feeling refreshed, inspired, and connected with the beauty of your soul. Your soul is your spirit incarnated into your material body. It leaves every night. So when you go to bed, you can pray and say, God, take my soul along with my spiritual guide. Take me to good places. Help me have pleasant dreams. So, there's another way of communicating according to the Spirit's book, and it says here at the end of the passage, while awaiting other means that will be more direct and more accessible to your senses. What do they mean by that? Well, a more direct form of communication would be something we can hear with our physical material ears, see with our own eyes, taste and smell. Those are the senses that we're talking about here. So, aside from those other four means of communication we just talked about, there is a direct way. And it is through a spiritual medium. Well, what is a spiritual medium? Let's go ahead and find out and hear a little bit more from this. His name is Julio Calvalo. He's from the Spiritist Center Divine Light, Newark, New Jersey. He has a YouTube video entitled, What is a Medium?
Hi there. You're watching a short series of basic questions about Spiritism. What is a medium? According to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language, a medium is that which lies in the middle, or between two things. From the Spiritist perspective, a medium is a person that is able to serve as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual world. Simply put, a medium is a person in contact with the spirits. Allan Kardec studied more than 1,000 mediums and concluded in the Medium's book that the mediumistic faculty, or the ability to communicate with the spirits, it is not a privilege possessed by a few, but rather a natural faculty that all human beings have, but in different degrees. To make easier to understand, allow me to use the analogy of intelligence. We know that everyone has the intellectual ability, or simply said, the ability to learn. But we generally call intellectuals those who surpass the common knowledge of the masses. The same principle is used when referring to mediums. Everyone is a medium, but the term medium is generally used to describe only those individuals who have the mediumship faculty in a more developed degree than the general population. Let us explain why are we all mediums. When someone feels the presence of people, when there is no one physically present, or when you think about a friend and within seconds you receive their phone call, or for instance, when someone has a strong urge to make a particular choice and at the end their intuition was right, when you sleep and you have dreams with relatives who passed, these are evidence of mediumistic ability that we all have. But then there are individuals who are able to see, hear, and speak with the spirits on a higher level of communication. In general, only these individuals are called mediums because their ability to communicate with the spirits is on a higher level than the common person. Let us be clear that Spiritism did not create mediums or mediumship. It only formed these new terms to describe a natural law. In the past, the history books gave names such as prophets, witches, and sorcerers to those who were able to receive messages from the spirits. With Allan Kardec's studies in the Medium's book, one will learn that a medium is a regular individual, just like everyone else, but who was born with this faculty. Also, it is very important to emphasize that since the person was born a medium, the faculty was given freely as an innate faculty. Thus, mediumship should also be used freely. Additionally, mediumistic episodes can only happen with the collaboration and presence of spirits. Therefore, the medium cannot force the spirits to communicate. For these reasons, Spiritism teaches that mediums should not use this ability for financial gain. The Medium's book is an incomparable source of knowledge if one wants to learn about the safe and, most importantly, the moral and ethical practice of mediumship.
Okay, so what they're saying here is mediums should not charge. So don't go looking for people that are going to say, yeah, I'll give you a reading and it'll cost you $50. Then you have to consider what kind of people is this medium surrounded by? And what I mean by people is what kinds of spirits are around this medium as well. You see, the morality of the medium says a lot about the level of communication you're going to have with these mediums. So always beware. Now, people might say, no, we're not supposed to use mediums. That's evil. Well, at one time in our history, perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, we were told, no, don't do this. Don't seek out mediums. It's dangerous. It's evil. You'll get into trouble. Yes, we had to be told that because 1,000 years ago, we didn't know how to control mediumships. People were just speaking in tongues. They were going out blabbing things and we were scared. Others were curious. We thought it was funny. So we made a mockery of mediumships. People have been mediums for centuries. Yet it was never in a controlled fashion. Until Allan Kardec came and asked these questions very seriously to these serious mediums. And thus, the Medium's book, the Spirit's book, all of these books came about. And now we have sort of a guideline. And we also know what to look for when we listen to communications from mediums. So, is communicating with those beyond the grave a blasphemous act? There can be no blasphemy where there is reverent concentration of thought and sympathy, and when the evocation is made with fitting respect. The proof of this is found in the fact that the spirits who love you take pleasure in coming to you. They rejoice in being remembered by you and in being able to converse with you. They do what? Well, yes, they rejoice because they're still alive. Our loved ones still exist. you and I will still exist when our body dies. We maintain our character, we maintain our thoughts, our feelings, and we still continue to live on. Our family members who are in the spiritual world, they know where we are, and they'll come to us when we call them. They'll be around, and they take joy in knowing that we don't forget them, and that we ask God to help them. Is it natural for us to mourn the passing? It is natural for us to mourn the passing of a loved one. But what happens when we prolong that grief? A spirit is touched by the remembrance and regrets of those he has loved, but a persistent and unreasonable sorrow affects him painfully. Spirits see your excessive grief as a lack of faith in the future. You are seen as having no confidence in God. Grieving excessively creates an obstacle to your spiritual progress. Your departed loved one will suffer knowing that your inconsolable grief is not only painful to you, but it limits the possibility of communicating with you. So, if we're trying to find a way to communicate with our loved ones who are in the spiritual world, yet we're in grief, we're in pain, we're suffering, and we keep screaming out that we miss them, then it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to get near us, for them to come by and help console us. So let's be open to the fact that we need to have faith in God. Let's have a short recap of what we just talked about. Grieving is a natural process. It is a trial or an expiation. There is goodness in places where we think there is evil. God's wisdom is everywhere. Call to your loved ones. Ask God to bless them. We have the ability to communicate with those beyond the grave through prayer, meditation, intuition, and dreams. Mediums also exist throughout the world. They are few and far between. And we also must be vigilant and careful as to which medium we choose. Persistent and unreasonable sorrow will be painful for you and your loved one. Faith in God, let's remember that He is our Creator and He loves us. And we are here for a purpose, and that is to grow spiritually. And the only way we can grow is through pain and suffering. We just have to accept it. Now, can there be happiness in our life? Absolutely, yes. We can have short spurts of happiness in our life, but it's not always going to be roses. Thank you, everyone, for listening. God bless, and see you next week.